I'm going to perform a VMware Workstation Pro Active Directory Lab setup. And this is the setup I am going to be using. I'm going to be using a Windows 11 computer as my host. And I'll be installing VMware Workstation Pro onto that. And I'll be installing 3 different virtual machines. So I'll be using the first 2 as domain controllers in Active Directory, and the third one's going to be a Windows 11 workstation that I'm going to be joining into the Active Directory domain. So let's go ahead and get started. It doesn't matter if you're using Workstation Pro or you're using the player version. It all just works the same. All right, so I'm going to type in VMware Workstation download. Now you're going to need to create an account with VMware with Broadcom, unfortunately, but that's okay. I'll go ahead and click on Download Fusion or Workstation. And I'll be using Workstation, as I mentioned. And staying in line with Broadcom's quite confusing type of way of doing business, there's no real way to just register for a new account that you see here on the home website. So you have to go to login, then go to, oh, I forgot my username and password, and then you'll see at the top the register button. So unfortunately, that's just the way that Broadcom works. So we'll just ignore that and continue on. So I've already registered, so I'm going to put in my username and password here. So now I'll click on the free software downloads available. Click here. And I'll go down to where it says VMware Workstation. And you can choose Player or Pro. And like I said, they work the same way, so you're really not going to see much of a difference, maybe a slight menu difference, but that's about it between the 2 different versions. When you select the version, go ahead and choose the top one to get the latest one, or you can go down a version if you have an older version of an operating system that you're going to be hosting this on, or you're having any kind of issues using the latest version, so you're getting errors or other types of problems. So I'll go ahead to the right and choose to download. Now, if you don't see this lit up, it means you have to click a box here that I'd already clicked that said to agree to the terms of service. So now VMware Workstation is downloading. And by default, it's going to show up in my Downloads folder. So I'll go ahead and double click on it and run through the installation. And as you can see here, this is version 17. Now, I'll be using Windows Server 2025 for my Active Directory servers, but it really doesn't matter if you're using an older version. 2022, 2019, 2016, they all look and work exactly the same when it comes to setting up Active Directory. And I'll go ahead and click Next, accept the agreement. Now, a lot of you are going to see this. Now, even though I don't have Hyper-V installed, and you can go and double check that yourself just by going into Control Panel on Windows 11 and then going to Programs and Features, turn Windows features on or off. Now, the latest version of Windows 11 might have moved this to the settings area, but it still works the same way. So just look for turn Windows features on or off. I've gone ahead and unchecked Hyper-V and rebooted previously before I even started this process, but it still is detecting that I have Hyper-V installed. So I'll just choose to install the Windows Hypervisor platform automatically. Click Next. Add VMware Workstation Console Tools. I'm going to uncheck the VMware Customer Experience. I don't need that. And I'm going to leave the check for product updates. Click Next and install. Usually you don't need to restart after doing this installation, but you may be prompted to do so, and if that's the case, go ahead and restart, and then you can go ahead and launch the VMware Workstation Pro from the icon that you see just appeared on my screen in the upper left-hand corner. And I'm all done, so I'll click Finish. And you can see in the lower right-hand corner that I need to do a restart, so I'll go ahead and do that. In this case, it's just because of an update. It's possible it also had to do with this VMware installation as well. I've restarted my computer, and now I've got my VMware Workstation Pro icon. I can go ahead and launch. So one problem is I need to have the ISO files that are going to be bootable files in order to create the new virtual machine. So what I got to do is I got to download them. And you can get to some free demonstration versions by typing in Windows Server Demo Download. Now I want to choose the Microsoft site that's called the Microsoft Evaluation Center. Now at the top you want to look for a couple different things. The first one is Windows Server. So you can choose Windows Server all the way back to Windows Server 2016. And as I mentioned, when it comes to Active Directory, there's really no difference. It's just a slight menu difference at the bottom with the toolbar and the start menu. That's about it. But it all works exactly the same way all the way back to 2016. So I'm going to download the ISO file so I can run the installation. And as far as the registration, you can just put in any fake information. You'll still be able to download it. So I'm all done filling out the information. I'll click Download Now. Now I want to choose the 64-bit ISO download. And now it's downloading. You can also choose the VHD download, which is going to have a file that's all ready to go as far as mounting the virtual machine. However, I've not tested this in VMware Workstation. It does work in Hyper-V, however. Now I'm going to do the same thing, but download the Windows 11 client. I'll choose the Enterprise version. And these will give you a certain amount of free days, typically the 180 days, but sometimes you'll see a 90-day version, so it just depends on what you get when you download it. So I'll go ahead and put the registration information again and download Windows 11. Now I'm going to choose my 64-bit version. I don't have the ARM processor, just using Intel on that. And you can see the two files are downloading. If you'd like to see any full courses I've done over 120 courses total for companies like LinkedIn Learning, Cengage, Pluralsight, InfoSec Institute, O'Reilly. Just go ahead and go to your favorite site, type in my name, and you'll be able to find all different types of courses that I've done. The downloads are complete. So I'm going to go ahead and create a new virtual machine and choose the downloads folder where my two different ISO files are sitting. So I'm going to choose the Create a Workstation 17 or later virtual machine in a few easy steps, but you can also choose the custom option. Now I need to choose the browse option to go to my ISO. So I'll go to Downloads, and here are my two ISO files. So obviously this one's the client, this one is the server. I'm going to choose to create the server first. And I'll click Next. And now it's going to prompt me for the product key, username, and password. So I'm going to put in the username as administrator. I don't need a key because it's a demo version, and I'll put in the password later. So you get this message about the product key. That's okay. Now it's choosing the location for this file. So let's go to the C drive. I created a folder called Virtual Machines, or VMs, so I'm going to choose that. Next. Now choose the maximum size for your disk capacity. I'm going to choose the default and allow the split virtual disk into multiple files so it'll make it run faster. And I'll click Finish, and it's going to power on. Here's a message about the side channel mitigations. I'm just going to go ahead and ignore that and continue. It's mentioning I can connect my camera and my Bluetooth if I'd like. I'll just say don't bother me again on that and continue. Now I'm just going to do the installation of the Windows Server just like you would any other installation. There's not going to be any difference. As far as it's concerned, it thinks it's installing it onto a physical host, but really it's a virtual machine. So I'll let this install, and then I'll go ahead and install my second virtual machine, which will also be a Windows Server 2025, and then the Windows client, and then I'll get started on Active Directory. While I'm waiting, I want to go up to Edit and choose the Virtual Network Editor. And what that's going to do is it's going to show that it took my physical network interface card, and then it basically just went ahead and created a virtual network interface card as well on a completely different subnet. So I'm going to go ahead and just leave this as is. The good news is I'll be able to communicate with my other virtual machines as well as the internet, which will go through my host computer as needed. It also created a DHCP server, and you can see here the subnet IP, etc. You can click on the settings if you'd like as well. So if you'd like, you can go in and create static IPs instead. Now I'm going to do that. I'm going to go ahead and create static IP addresses so I can communicate with the other domain controller and host. And that's because you don't want to have Active Directory running in DHCP. It just doesn't recommend it, and it's also a problem if you ever end up having your DHCP server change the IP address of your Active Directory server, then your clients won't know how to reach it. As the server is getting set up for the first time, I just want to show you there's another option here. Instead of installing the operating system again, you can just right-click and choose Clone. Now, I've had some issues with cloning causing some problems, so I'm not going to do this. I'm just going to continue running another installation of this particular Windows 2025 server. But I just wanted to show you that is an option if you'd like to try it out. Here you can see that VMware Tools is setting up the installation automatically, and the tools will allow you to do things like copy and paste and move a little bit more easily in and out of the virtual machine itself, and to be able to change some of the graphic settings. And it's going to require a restart, so I'll click yes, and that virtual machine will restart. In the meantime, I can go up to File, New Virtual Machine, and just run through the wizard once again. This time, though, I'm going to go ahead and choose Custom just so you can see some additional options. So I'm going to choose Next. It's going to choose my same ISO file by default as last time. And I'll go ahead and put in my administrator name. And no password at this time. We'll need to add a password in order to install Active Directory, though. And click Next. And continue on through the installation. I'm going to call this -2, so we know that this is the second virtual machine installation. And I'll go to the VMs folder, choose to create a new folder, and I'll just call it Win25-2, but you can call whatever you'd like. Click OK, Next. Choose the UEFI option. Now it's asking me how many processors. This is a really good question. So if I go into Task Manager, I can go into my performance area, and you can see under CPU, I've got 10 cores, 12 logical processors. So I can go ahead and raise this up to, say, 4, for instance, and make it run faster. By default, it only wants to use 2 gigs of RAM. Once again, I'll go back to my Task Manager, into Performance, and you can see I'm only using 22% of my 40 gigs of RAM. So I can go ahead and make that much higher. I'll go ahead and give it 6 gigs instead, approximately. And I'm going to choose the same NAT configuration. And I'll click Next, Continue, create the new virtual disk. 60 gigs again, split into multiple files. And now you've seen the custom installation. It's really not that much different. It does give you the option for adding in the additional processors and cores, as well as changing your RAM. Other than that, it's pretty much the same as the Express version. And it's starting to install my Windows server. I'm going to go back to my first server and just make sure that it's all up to date. So I'll go to the Start button, and I'll choose Settings. And this may take a while to complete when you're running this the first time, especially if you're using an older version, an older operating system. You can see here that I am up to date already, so that's because I had just downloaded the latest version, but I'll do a check for updates anyway, just to be sure. And even though it said it was up to date, it did find more updates, so just keep that in mind. I'll go back to my second server here, and we can see that it is about halfway done. So once again, I'm leaving the DHCP IP settings until everything's up to date, so I can go in and set this all statically afterwards. My second server is complete. It's running the updates. Now I'm going to add in the Windows 11 virtual machine. I'm going to choose the typical this time since we did custom already. And I'm going to browse and choose my client instead. Click Next. Choose my location. Create a Win11 folder. And it's a little different than the Windows Server. You have to generate a password for the Trusted Platform module. So I'll just go ahead and choose Generate, copy just in case I need it, and just continue on. And then my Windows 11 virtual machine is starting. Take a look at the bottom. You'll also see that you sometimes are going to get the mouse locked into position until those tools are installed. And if that's the case, just press the Control and Alt keys at the same time, and that will unlock you if you need to get out of the virtual machine. So I'll continue running the installation and agree to the terms. And at this point, it's the same as doing a physical install. Windows 11 has been installed, but we don't necessarily need to put in a sign-in for Microsoft. We can choose sign-in options and choose domain join instead. Now we're just going to put in a name. I'm just going to put the letter X just to keep it simple, but you can put your name in if you'd like, and you've got to put in a Windows 11 password just to log into the computer. And click Next, and do the confirmation. Of course, answer these security questions, just in case you forget your password. While I'm waiting, I can go ahead and get started on the Active Directory portion. Now, Active Directory is going to allow me to manage my servers and my computers all from a single location. So it's a good idea to find other sources within this channel, if you'd like. I have got over 4,000 videos, and many explain why it is you need Active Directory. All right, so what I want to do next is I want to go in and set up the IP address. So I want to make sure that all three computers are going to be on the same subnet. So I'm going to change my IP from DHCP to manual and turn that on. And I'm going to choose the same subnet we're already on. I'm just going to go ahead and put in static IP addresses. Static IP addresses don't change when you go to restart a computer. They're always going to be the same. And I'll complete that. To point the preferred DNS back to itself, because it's going to need that for Active Directory. You don't want to point your DNS to a public server, and that's because if the public server responds first when a request is done, it's going to say it doesn't know anything about the other computers in your organization. You always want to point it back to the first domain controller, and then from there you can do what's called a forwarder. Next, I need to go ahead and rename the computer, because after the computer has been made into a domain controller, you cannot rename it. So I'm going to go to the Start button, choose Settings, and then go ahead and choose to rename the server. So we go to System, which it opens up by default, click About, and then go ahead and choose to rename this PC. I'm going to call this one DC1 because it's going to be my first domain controller. And then go ahead and restart. So now I've got my static IP set, I've got my computer renamed. I'm going to do the same for the 2025-2 server. I'll start with the IP settings. And I'm going to make this 101. The other computer was 100. But I do need to set up the DNS to point back to my DC1. So I'll enable IPv4. And here you can see the IP address is .101. I've kept the other information the same and pointed DNS back to the DC1 server. I'm going to go to System and rename this computer, restart it, and then I can go ahead and install the roles needed in order to make this a domain controller in our new domain. Now I need to add that password as I mentioned earlier, otherwise Active Directory won't install. So I'll go into Tools, Computer Management from Server Manager. Go to Local Users and Groups, Users, Administrator. I'll right click and choose Set Password. And click OK. And that's done. I'll need to do the same on DC2 later on. Let's go ahead and install the roles needed in order to make this a domain controller in an Active Directory domain. So here you can see I've got my DC1, I've got my IP address ready to go. All I need to do is check the box for Active Directory Domain Services, but it's also going to add in some other tools and features as well. So I'll click Next, just continue, and click Install. Now once this is done, it doesn't mean this is a domain controller. I still need to configure it, but it's just a couple of minute process in order to do that. And the role and features have been installed, so now I'm going to go up to this little triangle at the top and choose to promote this server to be a domain controller. Now this is our very first domain controller in a brand new domain, so I need to choose the option to create a new forest. When you create your first Active Directory domain, you also create a forest. You can have multiple different domains underneath the forest if you'd like. Since this is just a test domain, I'm going to put in mydomain.int for .internal, but if this is a production domain, then I suggest you purchase the domain from, say, Network Solutions, GoDaddy, or some other company, and you choose that domain for your Active Directory domain, and then add in a certificate that you purchase, because you'll need those certificates for other things in the future. But since this is just a demonstration on an internal domain, I'm just going to click Next. Now we choose the forest functional level. You want to make sure that if you're using Windows Server 2025, that you're using the 2025 forest functional level. If you're using 2016, 2019, or 2022, you've got to choose the 2016 version. And the reason for this is a little unclear, but it looks like Microsoft just did not create a domain and forest functional level for 2019 and 2022, so just choose the 2016 version. Now I'm going to leave the rest of these the same and put in a directory service restore mode password. This is just in case Active Directory breaks. It gives us a local administrator password that we can use to log in if needed. And click Next. This warning is normal. You can just ignore it. Now it's going to automatically fill in the NetBIOS domain name for Windows NT servers from the 1990s. Yes, it's still in there, but it doesn't really do anything, so you can just ignore it. If you end up getting an error at this point trying to create the domain, it's because we didn't use a password at the beginning when we created the virtual machine. We just put in the username and optionally decided not to add in a password. So if that happens, you're going to get an error. Just go ahead and run this command from a command line, netuser administrator / password require yes, and then you won't get any errors. All right, so I'll go ahead and click Install. When it's all done, it's going to automatically restart. And the first time we log into the domain, you're going to see a whole new desktop. While I'm waiting, I'm back in the Windows 11 computer, and what I want to do is to install the VMware tools. So if we don't install the VMware tools, then you'll have to press the Control-Alt every time you want to get out of the virtual machine. The VMware tools are automatically going to mount a DVD, and then it's going to go ahead and launch the tools installation. So you can just go ahead and choose all the defaults. So unlike the Windows Server, which does it automatically, it's going to need to be manually added on the Windows 11 computer. And you can see when the tools are installing that your graphics are going to get much better, so it fills the whole screen, but it's still going to require a restart when it's done. I'm in the Windows computer. After a restart, I'm going to point the same IP settings, static IP address settings, as I had done in my previous servers. So I'll change it to manual, turn on IPv4. I'm going to make this address 102. After setting it to 102 with the same subnet mask and gateway, I've gone ahead and added in the preferred DNS to point back to DC1. Now I need to make sure that my computer is named properly. So I'll go to System About and rename this PC. And I'll just call this Client 01. And I'll restart. I'm now logging in the first time as the domain administrator. I'm going to go to Tools and Active Directory Users and Computers. That's the utility that is most used by sysadmins just to manage Active Directory. And we can see the name of the domain and the domain controller. Now I'm going to go into DC2, which I've already renamed, and I've added in the Active Directory Domain Services role as well as the password. And I'm going to add this as a second domain controller in my domain. So I'm going to go to the triangle at the top again, since I've already added in the Active Directory Domain Services role. And now I'm going to choose the Add a Domain Controller to an existing domain. So last time I chose the New Forest. This time I'm choosing the existing domain because it already exists. Instead of clicking on Select, I'm going to go to where it says Change and put in the Active Directory username and password. And notice that I put in the administrator at mydomain.int instead of putting in mydomain/administrator. That's because in Windows Server 2025, it typically doesn't work unless you do it that way. Then under domain, it automatically populated, but if it doesn't populate for you, you can just go to select and then you'll see it in the list and click OK. So I'll choose Next and run through the wizard just as I did with the initial installation of the first domain controller. Warnings that you see here for the delegation for DNS is normal. Once again, you can just ignore it. Click Install, and then this server is going to install this as a second domain controller inside Active Directory, and then it's going to automatically restart. Now, while we're waiting, I can go ahead and go right to my Windows 11 computer and join it to a domain as well. And I've done the same thing here. I've gone in and renamed the computer to Client01, as you saw earlier, and I put in the password. And now I'm going to join this to the domain. So it's a little different procedure because I'm not making this a domain controller. I'm going to go to Settings, and inside Settings, inside System, which is the default, we scroll all the way down to the bottom and click on About. Now I'm going to click on the link that says Domain or Workgroup. Next, I'm going to click Change, and I'm going to put in the name of the domain. Capital letters don't matter, so I can just go all lower, uppercase, whatever works best. And I'll put in the username and password. And it says, Welcome to mydomain.int. Now, I will need to restart, of course. So I'll restart, and I'll get a whole new desktop once again. I'm going to go back to my original DC1. I'm going to refresh, and I should see DC2 in there now, and there it is. And if I go to computers, there's Client01. So I went in and created 3 virtual machines, 2 servers, and 1 client, and I went ahead and added in Active Directory, added a second domain controller, and joined my client into the Active Directory domain. From here, you can add additional servers or clients, whatever works for you. Just make sure you don't overuse the resources on your host computer. And you can go ahead and run this, and you can use this as a sandbox. You can use it for a home network. So that is how you set up VMware Workstation on a Windows 11 computer and adding in Active Directory and Windows Server 2025.